Houston, flight is go.
Mila, let's go.
From Assignment X, Amalgamated Storytelling, and thesoniashow.com, it's Dorking Out with Sonia Mansfield and Christopher Allen Smith.
Welcome to episode 72 of Dorking Out, a podcast for people who like to dork out about stories and the stories and culture that we love. That means movies and TV, books and podcasts, and everywhere else we find stories that interest us. This is the It's Time to Reboot Hollywood edition. With me today is my co-host, professional writer, and author of The Sonia Show, my authorized biography, Sonia Mansfield.
Hey there.
Hey, you.
With me today is my co-host, Emmy Award-winning filmmaker and nerd author, Christopher Allen Smith. In this week's episode, we're going to visit Dorking Out Studios and talk about some movie franchises. I got it.
You got it.
That we'd like to see rebooted. I think our picks, Smith's picks, will surprise you. One of the awesome things about Dorking Out Studios is the complete lack of sexual abuse and harassment, which brings me to our second segment. Our second segment is going to be about sexual abuse and sexual harassment, but it'll be fun. Is every man in Hollywood awful? We're going to talk about it.
Not just Hollywood.
And finally, not just Hollywood. And finally, Smith and our Star Trek experts, Jeff Bond and Alexandra August, talk about Sunday night's Chapter 1 finale of Star Trek Discovery. We've got a lot of dorking out to do, so let's get this podcast started.
What do we have, Sonia? Try that last one more time.
We've got a lot of dorking out to do. What? Let's get this podcast started. I haven't been drinking, I swear.
Well, start. Get going. Something.
I'm like, I had chocolate pie and like coffee. I'm all caffeinated. I haven't been drinking. I swear.
Topic 1. If we could reboot anything in Hollywood, what would we pick? We find ourselves in a week with not a lot going on when it comes to stories and pop culture that we love. I'm kind of interested in who killed somebody on the Orient Express, I guess, but not enough to really talk about it here. So what do couples sometimes do when they don't have a lot going on and there's too much time on their hands? They find
people who aren't couples.
That's right. Well, we're a couple of people on this thing. Everybody knows we're married. We've talked about it. Don't be so sensitive, Sonia. Damn. Save that for topic 2. Anyway. They find something to argue about. Actually, you know what? I'm sorry. You were just supporting my point by arguing with me during that exact line.
That was my plan.
So here we are. A persistent theme on this show is remakes, reboots, revisits, and revivals. When it comes to stories and pop culture that we love, what separates something that could be a worthwhile remake or reboot like The Thing or Cape Fear or Ocean's 11, 3:10 to Yuma, Casino Royale, and what makes something blasphemous and just totally off limits for remaking like Casablanca, E.T., Wizard of Oz, Psycho, Back to the Future, maybe, Jaws, Airplane, those kinds of movies. Sonia. So Sonia and I thought we would talk about this. Sonia! We would talk about this. No.
I'm listening.
I'm listening. So I thought that we would talk about kind of our ideas for rebooting properties, what might be interesting. I suspect one or both of what we are proposing will get quite a bit of hate mail, and I am anticipating
for yourself. My idea is gold.
It is. No. I think they're both gold, but I think they're going to start some arguments. But anyway, first off, though, and I was trying to do this when I was thinking about the franchise or the thing that I would remake. What separates something that is off limits and something that that's fine, that people aren't going to care about, that you would not care about? Like, what? How do you? draw a distinction between those two?
I think that remaking things that are already awesome is a bad idea. Like, remake something that was kind of crappy or mediocre instead of trying to tackle, like, don't remake Casablanca. It's perfect.
Right.
Just the way it is. You're not going to do better than that.
Right.
Like when they tried to do, what was it? Gus Van Sant tried to do Psycho, like shot for shot.
Right.
That's a huge fail. Psycho's perfect just the way it is. It doesn't need a remake.
Right.
But something like Ocean's 11, the first one's pretty cheesy. You know, it doesn't really hold up. It's not like a super great movie. That's a perfect candidate for a remake.
All right. What would you say about King Kong though? Because the original King Kong was,
of course, my theory now just totally ruins my pick.
Well, that's true. Actually, I didn't even think about that. Well, see, here's the thing: is I tend to agree with you. That for me, that was the line. But then I was starting to make a list of things that have been remade and things that I didn't think could be remade.
Yeah.
And I was kind of surprised at what I felt had fallen into which category. For example, I do not think you could remake The Godfather. It's just there's no real point. There's nothing that you could add to it that would make it any better. There's no new spin you could put on it that would pull more meaning out of the same idea. And I think for me, that's kind of where it boiled down to. Like, King Kong is a classic movie, 1933, one of the first great adventure movies. But when you remake something, you kind of get a chance to A, do it over, but B, when you make something for the first time, it kind of gives rise to a lot of interpretations or a lot of thoughts, and people have a lot of feelings about it, and there's reaction to a certain piece of culture that's made. And sometimes when you remake it, you get to kind of pull that conversation into the new thing, and if you put a new spin on it, then it becomes this whole other interesting thing. Like, I think Peter Jackson's remake of King Kong is interesting. The way that it deals with, endangered species, what it's like for King Kong to be the last ape of his kind, the different racial, subtexts and all that, which were kind of there in the original, but really pulled out here. Plus, it's a lot more spectacular or whatever. So when you put all those things together, I think that there are classics that you could remake that would, I think a lot of people would think are on that list of things that you can't touch that would be kind of interesting. One of the, I was talking to my sons about this, and we were talking about, and he was talking about how you don't need to remake any Sherlock Holmes things. And, I was sorry to tell him, Benedict Cumberbatch's, performance in Sherlock is really one of the all-time greats for that character. And that character's been around for 120 years now.
Well, and that's a good example of a good remake reboot.
Right.
They modernized it. They took the bones of the stories.
Right.
And modernized it and made it different. It's different enough that it feels like a whole new thing, but there is that like familiar bones.
Right.
But it's different.
Right. And they were able to comment kind of on the whole detective thing. They were able to essentially, the genre that Arthur Conan Doyle created with Sherlock Holmes has been around for 100 years. So it's kind of like we get to kind of go back to the beginning after everything we've learned in the last 100 years and comment on all kinds of mysteries and all that kind of stuff. And yes, it's true that series has kind of gone off the deep end, but
for sure,
it was, those first 3 seasons were some of my favorite pop culture of the last 10 years.
Some damn good TV,
and then there's the thing that we thought that we've talked about before is most of the big things that people talk about when they say, "Oh, you can't remake that or you can't revisit that," have been done or are in and of themselves are already remakes, like, the classic Frankenstein, Wizard of Oz, Casablanca, all the Sherlock Holmes from the 1940s. I mean, you name anything, chances are it's actually a reboot. And the thing that I thought was weird about this is, do you think there was anybody in like 20-year-olds in the 1950s that were, or 30-year-olds in the 1950s, writing about movies, looking back at the 1930s and saying, "Oh my God, if they remake Buck Rogers, that's going to destroy my childhood"? Like, nobody would even
they weren't
conceive
doing
of that. It's such a weird modern view to get so up in arms about certain kinds of remakes, because I mean, and then we go to the classic Shakespeare has been remade, is being remade constantly for 500 years.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, on my other podcast that seems to only be seasonal at this point, Old Movies, New Beer.
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar
We actually did a whole episode about the Maltese Falcon and how that movie was remade like 3 times in 6 years.
Right, exactly.
And the classic one that we all love with Humphrey Bogart, that was the last one. There were 2 other ones before that. And everyone forgets that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, thank you. Exactly. And then, but I do have sympathy, I guess, for people who are tired of it or irritated with it. Because when I think about, and we've talked about this before, but like the Ghostbusters remake is all right, fine, whatever. It doesn't really irritate me, except for it. I think there is, especially in the last 10 years, I'll definitely grant this to kind of complainers about remakes. There's been a rush by movie studio executives to their archives, yanking out every film. Mm-hmm. Can we remake this? Maybe. This? Maybe. This? Yes, this. And there's kind of no, because Peter Jackson remade King Kong because that's his favorite movie. That's the movie that made him love movies. So if he's going to go at it, I would like to let him go do it.
Right.
I don't, if it's just we have, IP that we own and we may as well get working on it, then that's how you get like a total remake recall or total recall remake, which is so forgettable that I just, I'm not even sure what it's called anymore. Or just like that RoboCop remake, which I believe we've talked, which is just bizarre in its blandness.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. With that, Sonia Mansfield.
Yes.
Would you like to talk about
my pick?
Your pick.
Okay. I do want to say that I said this whole idea of maybe we don't remake movies that are like perfection. And then I was like, oh, I just crapped on my idea. I think my reboot idea isn't really about like a quote unquote remake. Mm-hmm. It's not about like taking the characters from this movie and remaking it. It's really more about the format and the idea. So I think the Before trilogy would make a really great reboot, which is, before Sunrise, Before Sunset, and Before Midnight, which of course stars Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy, right? Directed by Richard Linklater. And I think that this is a really good format they could introduce different actors, a different kind of couple, different dynamics. Every relationship is different. There's a ton of story opportunity here because you're not just going to tell the same story of Jesse and Celine. You're going to tell a completely new story. And I was trying to think of what actors would be great in this. And it's tricky because you need to start. I feel like you do need to start in like college age kids.
Right.
Like it can't be like they can't be in their 30s. They need to be college age. Because immediately I was like, oh my God, it needs to be like Donald Glover and someone else. Basically, I was like immediately I went to Donald Glover because I feel like it needs to be an actor who can contribute to the story. You know, not just an actor who's going to read lines. Like that's the whole thing with the Before trilogy is Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy, like they participate in the script for this. And I was like, oh, see, it needs to be like a Donald Glover type who is really smart and writes and directs and has like a lot of thoughts. But he's like 32 or 34. I was like, he's too old to play like a college kid, you know.
Right.
That they could revisit, you know, how often did they revisit them? Was it like every 10 years?
It's about every 10 years. I mean, that's one of the things that the way Richard Linklater uses time in his filmmaking is just amazing. And that is the thing that is so great is all that is we are going to examine human relationships, in this case between men and women, romantic relationships throughout a life. Yeah. That's the only real essential. So that's why I would think you could do another movie called Before Sunrise that wouldn't even be, you know, it wouldn't have that kind of, because I think this is maybe one of the things that the marketing for Sony when they did Ghostbusters kind of fell on its face is there is a kind of like we're throwing out the old and we're in with the new kind of thing.
Right.
And that's such a weird, and then, you know.
Yeah, they're not remaking this. It doesn't need to be tied to the original people at all. Right. This is just, it's really more about the format.
Yeah.
What I'm interested in.
Which would be interesting because Before Sunrise was a movie of its time. Like if there was Facebook, that movie would not have existed.
Right.
If there were smartphones, that movie would not have existed. The what happened would not have existed. So it would be interesting to have a set of characters that, let's say, we meet in college, and they know each other from the first movie all the way to the second movie, and then for some reason they get something brings them back together, or they look at each other in a new way and have some sort of romantic whatever, and then it would be there's a million ways to skin this cat. It would be, I think it's a fantastic idea. Who would be the actress, do you think?
Well, so it can't be Donald Glover.
Why not?
And because he's too old. So then I kept trying to think of who would it be. So then
like 25?
No, he's like 34.
Donald Glover's, all right, wow.
And then I was like, oh, what about Riz Ahmed? And it's like, no, he's like 32 or 34. Okay. And Dev Patel, 32, 34, like everyone I'm drawn to is like that age. And then I thought, what about like Michael B. Jordan?
How old's he?
He's like in his 20s.
Well, no, he could definitely do it. Yes, no, he could definitely do it. I don't think of him as that much younger than Donald Glover, I guess. But yeah, no, keep going.
So I was like, maybe him, or maybe Shamik Moore, who was in The Get Down. I was like, maybe like that. Right. And then I was like thinking maybe Emma Watson or I have a couple. Well, my original one was Anna Kendrick, actually, but she's too old. And then I was like, maybe Emilia Clarke.
Yeah.
Or Daisy Ridley.
Yeah.
Or, and I think this is my good one right here. Tessa Thompson from Thor Ragnarok. So maybe Michael B. Jordan and Tessa Thompson.
You know, if they could just put some boxing into that, I think we'd really have something.
Was she in Creed?
Yes.
See, I have no idea.
Have you seen Creed?
No.
Oh, Sonia.
I literally picked those two because I thought, oh, I bet they would be really good together.
Well, you're not wrong. See?
There you go.
See, listeners, this is why Sonia is Sonia, because she picked out Michael B.
hadn't-
Jordan and Tessa Thompson and put them together. And
I have not seen Creed. I did not know she was in that
all
movie.
right, well, there you go. Look at that. All right. And I was not laughing at you when you said Emma Watson. I was laughing with you, or you might actually be kind of laughing with me, as we will see here in a little bit. But
What about like a Daniel Radcliffe and Emma Watson, like a Harry Potter reunion?
that would be interesting. You know what would be interesting?
Also, I would like that if they could do like a gay couple, that would be a good one.
Yeah, I would. Yeah. You know what would be interesting is almost like a fictionalized version of Harry Radcliffe and
Oh, you're talking
Emma
about
Watson?
Daniel Radcliffe.
Daniel Radcliffe, Harry Radcliffe. That's right. Daniel
that would
Radcliffe.
be his name. That would be his name in this.
That's right.
Harry Radcliffe.
Harry Radcliffe and Emma Watson. Almost in like an extras kind of way. Like
Right.
it would be like a fictionalized version of themselves or a Curb Your Enthusiasm kind of way. But actually, now I think about it, that would be too Hollywood wacky, and we've already seen that before.
Yeah.
I like your version better.
Thank you.
So, interesting. Who would you get to direct them, or have you thought that far, or would you get? What was that?
I didn't get that far.
Okay, all right. No kidding. All right, yeah, I like that.
I also wrote down some other random ideas like Men in Black.
Yeah,
I think be rebooted. I think Mission Impossible could be rebooted.
Oh, it's going strong.
But it really could be. You could put someone else in there.
Well,
You
could.
don't even have to tie it to like the current Tom Cruise
And
one.
you essentially. So you're pitching a Mission Impossible extended universe kind of thing, where it's just some other mission from some other agent.
Just like when they don't when they stop making them with Tom Cruise because he's too old, like they could just move on to the next guy, kind of like James Bond.
That's right. Or are they?
And of course, we should mention our idea that we have brought up on here a few times, which is they need to remake Ace Ventura with Kate McKinnon.
Yes. Oh my God, we should have said that. How did we have this topic and we didn't even flesh out the Kate McKinnon Ace Ventura reboot? We're not paying attention.
We
Sonia.
brought it up like 3 times on the show.
You know what? Next time we do this topic, we have to really dive deep.
We
into
only
that.
just do that one.
That's right.
We're just going to talk about our idea for Ace Ventura with Kate McKinnon.
Well, because that's the thing is, I had an idea for what I was going to do for this, but I didn't have enough time to really think it out and flesh it out to the extent that it deserved. So that's why I switched. But I think if we really thought this out, and I think what you said here about before trilogy, if you sit down and really think it out, there's some cool, interesting, different stuff that could happen there. So, cool.
What's your idea, Smith?
Right now, I am channeling Chevy Chase in Vacation, where he's about to jump into the pool with Christy Brinkley, and he's nervous, and it's cold at night, and he's going to jump into this pool, and he's just trying to psych himself up, and it's like, this is crazy, but screw it, I'm going to jump into the deep end of the pool, and I think I'm going to, it's going to be interesting to see how many things I'm going to say that will irritate people. My movie is Raiders of the Lost Ark.
That might be blasphemy.
It is kind of blasphemy. But hear me out on this.
Okay.
When you start making a series...
You're all, hear me out, and then there's like dead air.
Let's look back at the inspiration for Raiders of the Lost Ark and look at the James Bond series. This is kind of, I think, the main reason sometimes things, almost always, if you really look at them over a long enough period, things need to be redone, or it's helpful or valuable to redo them. Which is, you make a movie, Dr. No, yeah, it's good. Then you make a couple more, and they're really great. And then the actor gets pissed, and he doesn't want to come back. So then you you kind of make the best movie in the series with an awful actor on Her Majesty's Secret Service, and that's kind of like, oh God, we had such a good thing going, and then we kind of derailed. And you know what? Let's get Connery back, but he's kind of bigger, and let's just keep going. And as you make movies in a series, this happens to all series. This happened to the Alien series, Lethal Weapon series, and then into the 70s, it happened with the James Bond series, is you make missteps and you make screw-ups. And in order to keep something going and keep something alive, you try different things. Sometimes it really works out and it's great. Sometimes it's awful. So when you reboot something, what you're able to do is look back over all that time, pluck out the things that worked, discard the things that were dead ends or wrong turns, and kind of revitalize something. And that's why I think, for my money, the best run of the James Bond series has been Daniel Craig's. Every movie has been good or great because they really focus on the strengths, but B, they examine Bond in a more mature, the Bond character in a more mature, interesting way, and kind of delve into the misogyny and why that's there. When back in the 60s, James Bond was not a misogynist, really. That was just
That's just how dudes were.
That was just heroic dudes in the 60s. And it was looking back from, once they'd been making them for 25 years, and you look back at those first entries, it's like, oh my God, what is wrong with James Bond? So then you put that in, and then you can kind of examine. So you're able to look at a character and look at a series and why you like it and why you don't in a million different ways. But then there's another thing that it's just, this is going to be, you know what? I'm going to save that part for later. So you can look at a series in a different way. And one of the things that I think in the Indiana Jones series that is really great is they have some of the best MacGuffins in all of film history, but they almost don't use them at all. There's a kind of lightness and shallowness, I guess, to those movies that is their strength, but might be a place to do a lot of interesting improvement. And what I step back here is, when you have a zombie movie, when they first came out with zombie movies, that's just like, all right, there's a zombie movie, and it's this new creepy kind of monster going after people. But as more and more filmmakers made zombie movies, and definitely with like The Walking Dead, it's the cool thing about the zombie movies, or at least for me, is not what the zombies do, but the effect and the changes that they provoke in the humans.
Right.
So it's like the zombies are a vehicle for humans, for examining human interaction and human decision making and human values in a very interesting, heightened way. And I feel like in Raiders, in Last Crusade, they had these amazing things that they never really did anything with. It's like, if you had the power to have somebody live forever with, the Holy Grail, what would you do with that? B, there's a lot of different ways to skin that story that I think would be maybe more interesting than the way that they did it. Even though, because what Lucas and Spielberg were going for is we just want to have a Saturday morning serial type series. That's it. It's fun, spectacular action, light fun. That's it. That's all we're doing. And they did it, great. But I think it could be interesting if they kind of did it if they use the MacGuffins as a more of a key to unlock different aspects of humanity and that kind of thing. So what I was going to propose is Ryan Gosling as Indiana Jones. I know everybody talks about Chris. Oh my God! Now that I'm saying
Pratt.
Chris Pratt, thank you. I was going to say, now that everybody talks about him, I forgot his name. Chris Pratt, and I don't know if Chris Pratt could do it. I've never seen Chris Pratt be really serious and really bottom. Like, I think his performance in Jurassic World, I was not super thrilled with. But the thing about Ryan Gosling, like Harrison Ford, is he can be tough, he can be rugged, but he can also get beat up and get his ass kicked, and you believe the pain. So there's kind of these.
Are you
both
saying
sides.
this because of Blade Runner?
No, I'm not. In fact,
After seeing them side by side.
No, it's funny because I almost pulled that back because I was trying to think. All right, who would Obviously, my first thought was Chris Pratt because everybody was talking about it, and I was like, I don't want to do that, and then I just started running through actors that would kind of be age appropriate, and when I thought about Ryan Gosling's various performances, A, in Blade Runner, B, in Nice Guys, it's like, oh, he could do both things. Because there's always that moment when Indiana Jones is about to get his butt kicked, or is getting his butt kicked, and you feel like, oh, they're really going to take him to town. He's really in trouble because he's really in pain, and I'm not sure he's going to be able to pull it off. And I think Ryan Gosling could do that with a light enough touch that would be really fun. I think a great director would be Shane Black for this because he does fantastic action. Iron Man 3 was a lot of fun. Nice Guys was a lot of fun. I think
underappreciated.
It is definitely underappreciated. I think he could do the character examination and the great character interaction in a way that would be interesting. Can you tell that Nice Guys is on HBO this month? So that's kind of what I'm thinking. So you
think Indiana Jones is basically like he could be like a Bond figure.
And that was the original idea.
Different actors play him in different generations.
Well, here's the thing. Is I'm going to get...
And not really remakes in that they're not going to tell the same stories.
No.
Or you think they should tell the same stories?
I think this is where I'm going to probably some people, whoever I might have persuaded a little bit, I think they're going to get off the bus at this point. Because I would say restart with Raiders of the Lost Ark. Set it
Stop
in the late 30s.
Bus. Let me off.
Set it in the late 30s. And Disney owns the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And if anybody has watched Hugo Weaving in Captain America, the First Avenger, there is a very obvious Raiders of the Lost Ark reference in Captain America. Talking about, he's playing this Nazi and how the Fuhrer is having his, men look for trinkets in the desert. And while he's in Norway looking for this stuff, I would put Indiana Jones into the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
No. Let me off.
But the other thing is, here's something that's interesting. And this is one of the things that I like most about Crystal Skull that they kind of left on the cutting room floor.
I'm sorry.
No, I know. Listen.
The thing I liked about Crystal Skull
is listen to this. I think you like this part
too. Sonia, are you still there? Hello.
Listen.
Hello.
Is the idea? It was basically the reference to all the years that had passed and all the adventures we didn't see, and how Indiana Jones had fought the Nazis, gotten out of World War II, and then started kind of going up against the Soviets. If you were to remake Raiders of the Lost Ark, I think it would be interesting to have essentially Stalin's Soviets and the Nazis and Indiana Jones all going at it at the same time. And what I would say is turn Belloc, Paul Freeman's great oily bad guy, kind of the mirror image of Indiana Jones from Raiders of the Lost Ark, into a Russian agent. So he's French and he works for the French, but he's really kind of a communist sympathizer. He's on the payroll of Stalin, and he's trying to help the Nazis get the Ark, but his main reason is to grab the Ark and get it back to Soviet Russia. And if you didn't kill him, Belloc could be essentially kind of like Indiana Jones's Blofeld through the rest of the series, and those two actors could kind of grow up side by side, and it would be interesting to have, Indiana Jones go from the 30s, see his adventures in World War II, see his adventures in the 50s.
Who plays that part?
That, I was thinking Jake Gyllenhaal.
Oh.
Would be kind of interesting. And I want to throw this idea might be a little crazy. One of the things that we never really saw happen in Raiders of the Lost Ark is the Ark used for what the Nazis wanted to use it for. So what I'm thinking is, what would be interesting, and this might be too heavy for an Indiana Jones type movie, is the Nazis are rounding up Jews all over Europe, and they somehow get a rabbi, kind of put the rabbi's family in a camp and say, you're going to do what we want you to do with this Jewish artifact, or your family is going to be in deep trouble. So there would be this character that the Germans are using to kind of work the Ark. And you would get like a Christopher Lloyd or a Richard Schiff or like an Anthony Hopkins type character that is being threatened and working for the Nazis as a rabbi, but he's, hating every moment of it. And it would be an interesting, I'm thinking the end of the Tanis dig doesn't end with like a truck chase. It ends with them getting him to essentially destroy the entire camp with the Ark. So we get to see the Nazis actually start using the Ark in an aggressive way.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually Indiana Jones somehow gets with him, talks to him, or he kind of, we could kind of do it like with Raiders of the Lost Ark, where the story would almost be the same if Indiana Jones wasn't even there. Where the rabbi realizes the coming war, the coming dark age if the Nazis get their thing, and decides, you know what, kind of almost pulls the bluff of the Nazis, and like, if you guys are intent on killing millions of people, why should my family be any different? So he, at the end, similar to the current version of Raiders of the Lost Ark, he opens the Ark and essentially kills everybody who's been threatening him and himself in a bid to kind of, but knowing Indiana Jones is there to safely get the Ark out of the island.
Yeah, it sounds like a lighthearted romp.
It does get a little dark there at the end. But then there's Salah, who I was thinking Ferran Tahir, who plays the captain of the Kelvin in the 2009 Star Trek. The captain at the beginning. I'm thinking it might be actually kind of fun to have an Arab character actually be played by someone of Arab descent.
What? That is some crazy thinking.
Then I was thinking, how fun would it be for Marcus Brody to be played by Hugh Grant? Hugh Grant's getting kind of old. He's kind of getting at that age. He would be a great British doddering professor. But he would, because that's one of the things that was so dumb about one of the huge missteps is Marcus Brody is this fantastic character in Raiders of the Lost Ark, but they need some comic bumbling foil, so his character completely changes in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and he becomes like this moron.
Right.
It's stuff like that that would be interesting to take kind of a different spin on this kind of stuff. And for Marion, I was thinking Emma Watson. So.
Oh, okay.
That's why I was.
Yeah, that would work.
Or Jessica Chastain. My wife was watching Zero Dark 30 earlier today, and I realized, wow, watching her, punch Ryan Gosling in the face, would be a lot of fun. So that is my pitch.
Okay. Well, you heard him, listeners. Give it to him on Twitter.
No, wait. One last thing I want to say. I forgot in this note. the thing that would differentiate this Indiana Jones series is it would be back when Spielberg did Raiders of the Lost Ark, he did all the practical effects.
This would be a musical.
That's right. He was trying to essentially rehabilitate all the movies he had made had gone way over budget, gotten way too expensive, gotten way too laden with special effects, or at least that was a little bit of the theory at the time. So Raiders was actually his quick and dirty movie. So most of the effects were practical. And I'm thinking that's the thing that would differentiate this new Indiana Jones series in the age of computer gimmickry or whatever, is it would be a Casino Royale / Mad Max Fury Road type production, where it would be nearly all practical, nearly all real stunts, shot in real places without green screen. There's no crystal skull stuff going on here. It would be a really, because that's one of the things that's so fun about the current Mission Impossible series is they're doing these kind of crazy, nutty, big stunts with Tom Cruise, and it's spectacular. It's a lot of fun to watch, even in this age when they can do anything with computers. So that is my pitch. We do
love watching Tom Cruise endanger his life. We do love it as a country. Actually, the world loves it.
Right. So let us have
this time it could happen.
You're awful.
I am awful.
But you're not wrong. All right. So that's it. Raiders of the Lost Ark rebooted. Let me have it. I dare you.
Get him, nerds. Hey, want more Dorking Out?
Yep.
You can visit our website at dorkingoutshow.com.
You can.
And you can like us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter.
On Twitter.
Do you listen to us on iTunes?
Yep.
It's cool.
It's cool.
We won't tell anyone.
Nope.
Please take a few minutes out of your busy day of pretending to work while you watch cat videos to give us a review on iTunes.
Cat videos!
For some reason, iTunes really cares about reviews, and it helps us attract more listeners, and you want us to have more listeners and be popular and cool, don't you?
Yep.
Of course you do.
Yeah.
And now, on with the show.
Yeah.
Topic 2. Okay, you guys, let's talk about it. Sexual harassment in Hollywood, or how is Michael Bay not in this list? I don't even know where to start with this one, so I just started writing a bunch of stuff down. For several weeks, it has been nonstop raining sexual harassment allegations. Every day, another member of show business, whether it's an actor, a writer, a director, a movie producer, is being accused of sexual harassment and sexual abuse. It's a long list. A really long list, but here's just the ones I thought of off the top of my head, and I'm leaving off the politicians, like our president. Harvey Weinstein, Kevin Spacey, Brett Ratner, Bryan Singer, James Toback, Louis C.K., Andy Dick, not surprising, and Dan Schneider, who produces every show on Nickelodeon. It's gross.
Oh, that's right.
and then we could throw in Bill Cosby, Woody Allen, and Mel Gibson. Every day I hear another story is coming out, and I think to myself, "Oh God, please don't be Weird Al Yankovic. He seems so nice."
Oh God.
I also think that about Jason Bateman. I'm like, please don't be Jason Bateman.
Yeah, no, I'm
he's
I'm waiting
my
for the
teenage
day
crush
George
that I'll
Lucas
never
shows
get
up.
over. I was like, please don't be Jason Bateman. I am super proud of all these brave women and men who are sharing their stories. And to the people that say that they are just sharing stories for publicity, you can go F yourself. It's not easy to tell these stories, and there are much easier ways to get publicity. These stories make me really angry, and they make me really sad. But I'm glad that the truth is coming out. I feel like maybe we're hitting a turning point where this sort of thing is just everything's coming out in the open, and maybe we'll start seeing less of it. And what's crazy is these are just the actions of men in really powerful positions. Now imagine the stories of women who don't work in Hollywood and the men who aren't in these kind of super powerful, famous positions. I've talked a lot Smith, what do you think? Is everyone in Hollywood the worst?
Well, yes, but we've known that. No. Yes, Hollywood is awful. Hollywood is awful. It is an awful, I mean, it produces, it's a city of dreams. It produces things that we love, but it is a brutal, awful, embittering, horrible, cruel, thoughtless machine.
I feel like a lot of people let things slide because they're like, well, they're an artist.
There is. And
they're an artist and that's why they behave badly and they do these things. But then you read these stories and you're like, this is beyond like just being a dick, basically. Like, this is gross. It's illegal.
Yeah. Well, no, that's the thing is, and I have some sympathy for the point of view of when you're trying to create stories and communicate the human experience and all its weirdness in a meaningful way in stories, the writer's room or, the process of putting that together and thinking it through, all the, people talk about things, they joke about things. Anybody that's been in a theater program watching a bunch of actors try to put a scene together is, there's a lot of, strange tension and a lot of, strange feelings and everything that kind of get involved. But none of that is, one of the things I think that separates this from that kind of hurly-burly of difficult creation is these are all clear-cut, open and shut cases. There's no there's no universe where Harvey Weinstein does what he does and that's part of any rational, reasonable, or Kevin Spacey, Brian Singer. There's no, Louis C.K. That's not a normal, reasonable, even outlier kind of action. Those are so far beyond the pale. I mean, literal rape and it's so far beyond that I think sometimes there's these discussions of he said, she said, or he said, or she said, that there is some kind of, well, maybe, I don't know. What is this person saying? What is that person saying? Let's try to figure it out. No, this is just so far beyond that I really do hope that it settles a lot of the questions that we sometimes have when these things get aired. And people who are knee-jerk suspicious of women who air these kinds of things or have been in the past, I hope they're seeing the reality of why people wait sometimes to talk or why people are scared to talk.
But that's what's crazy is I see so much on social media and it really does bring out the worst in people, of people who are still like, they're all lying. And I was like, yes, every woman is lying. We're all lying. We love to make up rape. It's super fun. It's, my favorite thing I do. It's my hobby. Like, that's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. There is, that is definitely ridiculous. And I was trying to think of, because this story came out about George Takei that I heard. It's like, there has definitely been a dam bursting kind of thing. And I'm not going to say a phenomena of it, but there's definitely everybody feels like they can tell stories that they haven't wanted to tell for years.
Right.
So there's that aspect of it going on. And what that's leading to...
it's starting to feel like they've created a safer environment for some of these people to share their stories that wasn't before.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. That's a better way to put it than the way I was putting it. But we've all known actresses and actors that love to be the center of attention. And they will tell certain, sometimes they'll tell stories, and it is sometimes a reasonable reaction to listen to them, tell a fabulous story and wonder where does what's really true and what they're saying here. And I think the difference with this is, and I think this is a pretty good illustration, is, okay, if one person is telling a story about somebody else, there could be some hatchet grinding, there could be some whatever. Two people telling a story about that same person, maybe you get too unlucky and you get two people that are coming at you. But once you get three people and every number beyond three, it's like, all right, come on. You don't have 40 people. You know, that's the thing that did Cosby in, even way before the trial. Okay, one theoretically, if we're going to be completely cruel about this, one crazy lady saying something, that's one thing. Two, all right. Three, no, I don't think so. 15, definitely not. 40, no effing way. You know, that kind of thing doesn't happen unless there is some definite, horrible, persistent craziness going on. So I do think it's, and it's funny. I know that we're kind of leaving politics out of this, but Mitt Romney had a fantastic distillation of this when he was talking about Roy Moore, which is innocent until proven guilty is for courts.
Yeah.
He was talking about election, but for us, it's like, we can talk about this. If somebody says something, you know, like the person saying this stuff about George Takei, it's like, all right, maybe not, you know, it's definitely something to think about the next time you're wanting to have George Takei in your Priceline commercial or whatever.
Right.
But, and I have started to see some things kind of creep in, like Matthew Weiner's, I guess one of the women that won an Emmy with him on Mad Men. I'm starting to, there's so many stories coming out now that you hear, oh, Matthew Weiner is the latest guy to be accused of blah, blah, blah. And because so much has come out, it's, oh my God, did he rape somebody? Or did he just say something awful in the writer's room and she's telling the story now?
Yeah, in The Office, the story about Louis C.K. came out like as a news alert, and we're like, oh, he just masturbated in front of him? Oh. Which is, by the way, it's awful. It's awful. But like, you're like, oh, is that all? Oh.
Well, here's the thing.
By the way, like, I don't really think that. I think it's awful.
Yes, that is still so very beyond the pale, open and shut. Yeah. But that kind of opens the door to the question that I was thinking about when we were talking about this. And we talked about this, I believe, in our first episode when we were talking about Bill Cosby and how do you regard the culture that has been made, the stories that we love that have been made by people who later turn out to be monsters.
Right.
With Bill Cosby, it was,
how do you separate the artist and the artist?
Exactly.
The art and the artist, yeah.
And I think the reaction from Bill Cosby was, all right, well, we're not going to show his show anymore. We're not going to have his new show on Netflix. We're not going to show his specials anymore. He's kind of written out of culture for right now. Well, we can't do that. Or we can't do that. The question is, like, if we were going to do that with Harvey Weinstein,
right,
we're throwing out every Quentin Tarantino movie.
Well, so I've been thinking about the Harvey Weinstein thing and Kevin Spacey, and I'm struggling with how it feels like, how am I going to put this right?
Yeah.
They are enforcing a sort of punishment on them, which they totally deserve.
Right.
That they have not enforced on other people.
Like, what do you mean?
And I'm like, so why? So they kick like Harvey Weinstein out of the Academy.
Right.
Great. Screw him. He's a monster.
Right.
But they gave a Lifetime Achievement Award to Roman Polanski. And it's not like, oh, it's a rumor about what Roman Polanski did. You know, it's like he can't come to the ceremony and get the award because he's, so I'm like, good on you. But hey, remember like a couple years ago, you totally gave an award to Roman Polanski.
Yeah. No.
You know, or right
Woody
now
Allen.
or they're giving awards to Woody Allen, or they are like, we're done with House of Cards and we're done with Kevin Spacey and Louis C.K. and all that. And it's like, well, you're keeping that sitcom The Ranch on, and that
Right.
stars Danny Masterson. He's been accused of rape like 2 or 3 times now.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm like, why does he get to keep his show, but these other ones are not? It's like, if we're going to enforce like this punishment, they need to do it. You do it. Like, you know, we went through this a lot with Charlie Sheen,
Right.
too. Like, Charlie Sheen is effing disgusting. He's gross. And now there's like new allegations against him saying that he raped Corey Haim. It's really sad. It's disgusting.
Yeah.
But people gave him a pass forever because he was on a sitcom they liked.
Right. Well,
It's too hard. That means I have to not watch his stupid sitcom, so I don't want to think about it. Like,
well, yeah, that's the thing is, and I think that there is that aspect of, you know, Charlie Sheen hasn't done anything that we care about in years, and
yeah, he's an easy one to give up.
Yeah, he's an easy one to give up. But then you think, like, Kevin Spacey has been one of my favorite actors. Does this mean we're giving up American Beauty or LA Confidential or The Usual Suspects? Does this, you know, Ben Affleck, he's been accused of some stuff that he's actually apologized for. Are we giving up Good Will Hunting? Are we giving up Argo? Are we giving up, you know, I think the question that was very theoretical and seemed very isolated when we talked about it with Bill Cosby is much less theoretical. And I'm almost wondering if it's a kind of, if you're an actor, well, I'm of 2 or 3 minds of it. If you watch Kevin Spacey in a performance, you're going to be reminded of that. Part of what a star brings to a performance is their persona off screen a lot of times. So you're not going to want to watch it. And I get it. Or people might not want to watch it. And I get it. But are we, or like the guy that, you know, is doing the producer on Supergirl, Flash, and The Arrow on the CW, like DC's whole television thing. You know, people are probably still going to watch that. And are we letting him kind of not get shut out of culture because he's not on camera? Kind of like if Bill Cosby had only been a producer of the Cosby Show, would that still be running? Running in reruns?
Yeah, no, that's a legit thing.
But here's the other thing that's kind of.
I mean,
awful.
I'm not mourning like the loss of, like, you know, it's like, yeah, does it suck that like Louis C.K. did the things he did? It super sucks. But, you know, and it's like, well, now like I won't want to watch his specials and that's too bad. But I wouldn't say I'm really mourning the loss of not getting to watch his specials anymore. But I'm more like kind of disgusted at the women that like didn't make their specials because they maybe got out of comedy or were blackballed out of the industry, you know. And I was like, that's what bums me out.
Yeah, that's a definite thing. And here's a story that I was gonna put into this because, you know, that kind of has changed, or I don't know what, since we began the show is. So a couple weeks ago, we talked about this. My wife, Laura, was in a pretty serious car wreck. We had to go one day. She was having a huge problem. We had to go to the ER. We were in the ER all day. She was incredibly dizzy. Got home. She didn't want to move, didn't want to talk, didn't want to look at stuff. She wanted to have the TV on to distract her, but was having a real hard time. And she wanted to watch The Cosby Show. Like, I think it was on, and I said, "You want to watch anything else?" She says, "No, this is just, it's a dumb laugh, or it's a laugh track sitcom that I just want to stare at. I don't want to think about." So I watched, you know, with her. I watched like 2 or 3 episodes of The Cosby Show back to back, and I hadn't watched it since all the stuff with Cosby had come out. And that show, those episodes were fantastic. Those episodes.
Well, it was a funny show.
It was. Well, that's the thing. It was more than just a funny show, but it was a really good family show.
Right.
It was a really good examination of kind of a, and this sounds so weird to say, it was a really good examination of what you would want a healthy family to function like. And it was funny, and it wasn't maudlin and corny like it got in later years. Like, it was really just, there's a reason that sitcom went through it was the biggest sitcom of the 1980s. So, and I found myself mourning, like, oh God, I can't really watch this. And I guess enough time had passed that the image of Bill Cosby going into a courtroom was not front and center in my mind when I was watching this. I was kind of seeing the Cliff Huxtable rather than the Bill Cosby. And I am mourning, and and when I think of all this culture that we would have to give, or theoretically would be in a pop culture jail, like we put all of Bill Cosby stuff into, I'm wondering if that's the best. If that's the best way. Well, part of me is wondering, on a practical level, are we going to have to give up like 2/3 of existing pop culture?
Well,
if we're going to have this pop culture jail, most things are going to go into it.
As we've talked about before, I think for me, you learn these things about people, they come out. Like, we're going to use Kevin Spacey as an example. Like, I wouldn't go see like the next movie that comes out that stars Kevin Spacey.
Right.
But does it ruin The Usual Suspects for me? No.
Right. Why?
Like if it was on, like I'd be like, oh, The Usual Suspects is on. I'd probably watch it. And it would come, like, I would think about what he did and be like, that's so gross, or it disgusts me, and that's just horrible. But I wouldn't be like, well, now I need to turn the movie off, or I can't watch this, or
right.
It probably depends on what the movie is, what the TV show is, what story you're watching.
Right.
Maybe, it's like Woody Allen. Like, I can't watch any Woody Allen movie.
Right. Right.
Because every movie he did, like, it's like him and like a 14-year-old girl is his love interest. Basically, it's gross.
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, yeah.
Annie Hall, maybe, but like a lot of them are, or maybe Crimes and Misdemeanors.
I think it was. I think the one you're thinking of is Manhattan.
Yes, he made quite a few movies where,
right,
with these older guys, younger women. It's kind of gross, and
right.
I can't watch that. And then you can't separate like what Woody Allen did from what you're seeing. Does that make sense?
No, it does make sense. And I'm trying to, because that is the other thing is, I've watched a couple things with Louis C.K. now, or kind of seen a couple clips and stuff, and it's like his jokes land different. I really don't know if I could watch.
That's a good example. Like, Louis C.K., when he's on stage and he's telling these jokes, he's himself, in theory.
Right.
Or
a version of himself.
Yes. And he has always been, he seems very progressive, and he seems very smart. And honestly, he seemed like kind of a champion of women, in like that, hey, men are stupid and women are awesome and women are smart and they're this and that. And so then to like watch something like that now, you're like, you're disgusting.
Well,
and hey,
here's the thing.
Women don't want to see your junk. You guys just keep it in your pants. Women don't want to see it. Want to see it.
I have to say, that is one of the crazier aspects of all the stuff that's going on. Like, when you hear the persistent theme of what Louis C.K. did and what other people did, it's like, part of me is like, wow, that's awful, that's horrible, that's whatever. And then it's like, is this like a big thing? The dudes
that was the thing with guys sending pictures of their junk. I was like, dude, ladies never want to see it.
Right.
They don't.
Right.
We don't want a photo, not ever.
Right.
If maybe some women would like to tweet me and let me know, hey, I totally want to see it, that I want pictures. Great. I'm saying a majority of women, they don't.
Right. And well, that's the thing. And even if the majority of women did, they don't want you to just, well, yeah. Some of the stuff that Louis C.K. is doing is so nuts that, and
by the way, I haven't watched it yet, but I read about it. Did you watch Saturday Night Live Saturday night with Tiffany Haddish?
Yes.
Hosting?
Yeah.
And apparently she had a tip for guys, which was like, if you're naked and whipping it out and the women are still clothed, you're doing it wrong. Like,
I guess I missed that. I kind of skipped through it with my TiVo, but I guess I missed that part. But yeah, no, that's a good rule of thumb. I will admit that is a sick pleasure I've been getting, is watching a lot of people in Hollywood, this kind of, we're supposed to be progressive, we're supposed to not be doing this, and having their little bubbles popped. It's like, no, people are awful everywhere. The idea that progressives are so much cleaner and better, I'm not laying this at your feet.
This isn't even like a political thing. This isn't like, oh, conservatives are this and liberals are that or whatever. No, this is awful on every side.
It is. But the thing that kind of set it for me, and maybe this is just kind of the back patting hypocrisy of Hollywood that has irritated me from time to time, is, did you hear about the guy that was in charge of the CBS diversity program?
No.
Where it's essentially a program where they bring in people of color, underrepresented minorities to kind of like put on plays and put on showcases for various executives and various writers and directors and get them jobs and stuff. And a lot of the people involved in the program are kind of complaining, he's, harassing and whatever, blah, blah, blah. But B, the main theme has been is, if you are like an African American, they want you to do a lot of, urban stuff and stuff. And, if you start telling stories outside of the box that they expect to see you in, there was a lot of pushback. Or if you were gay, they wanted you to be real queeny and real flaming. And if you got too far out of that box, they'd kind of push you back in.
Right. Jesus.
So it was like, hey, we're progressive, but it was a progressive based on tropes and stereotypes that Hollywood at once likes to quote unquote break down, but at the same time essentially embody and perpetuate. Yeah. Which I just thought was,
I just think this doesn't even fall along party lines. This is
right. No, it
just
doesn't.
So
right.
It's so gross on both sides. And
I do want to. Sorry. Keep going.
No, go ahead.
It is gross along party. I just thought that was funny. Part of me read that story and was kind of like, I knew it. I knew they were full of it this whole time. Anyway, I have a solution.
I would love to hear it.
We're going to call this the Michael Jackson rule. In honor of the late Corey Feldman. No, we're going to call this...
Corey Feldman's he's fine, everybody.
Well, he's alive. Which is, he was doing all that stuff supposedly with kids, and he was kind of getting a pretty battered reputation, went on trial, et cetera, et cetera. But when he died, it was kind of like, and I felt like I can't really listen to Michael Jackson stuff. And I can't really, I feel bad every time I listen to it. I don't want to buy anything because it's kind of like, I don't want to give money to this guy that's using the money to do this stuff to kids. But once he's dead, it's kind of like, hey, he's not doing it anymore. He can't do it anymore. I went out and I think I bought Michael Jackson's Greatest Hits.
So what you're saying is after Woody Allen dies, I could go back and watch all of his movies.
Well, kind of. Like, part of me is thinking, is that the thing? Almost like a
Woody Allen's gonna die, and I was like, sweet. Now I'm gonna go get that Blue Jasmine.
Yeah, that's right.
Blu-ray CD or DVD.
Now I can watch Annie Hall again. No, it's almost like a Pete Rose situation where while he's alive, he's not going into the Baseball Hall of Fame, even though he definitely deserves to. But once he's dead, okay, maybe you're in, and maybe that's the punishment. Kevin Spacey, you're out. You're done. Once you're dead, we can enjoy the good movies that you did, and the good stuff you did. Great. Bill Cosby, once you're dead, we can bring back the Cosby Show and enjoy it for what it was, and enjoy Felicia Rashad and Malcolm Jamal Warner and everybody. Maybe that's it. Maybe people are in, pop culture jail until they're dead, and then we can let them out, or until they retire or something, and then we can bring the culture back. Because I don't know. Maybe this is my weakness or whatever, but I just the thought that everything, all of Bill Cosby's material, and his show just being gone forever, just. I don't know.
It doesn't bother me. Screw that guy.
Well, okay, hold on though, Sonia Mansfield.
I'm quite serious.
No, I know you're serious.
I truly believe there's a lot of amazingly talented people in the world, and all these people, they need to go, and we'll make room for the new ones.
No, I get it. No,
for the talented ones who don't need to masturbate in front of women to be creative.
No, I get it. I agree 100%. I think that's kind of not the question. Yes, they're all gone. Okay. You can clear out the whole row. You can nuke LA tomorrow, and we would be making movies and TV that would be fantastic 6 months from now in Oklahoma City. What I'm saying is, if word came out tomorrow, if Natalie Portman came out tomorrow and said George Lucas did X, Y, and Z while making the prequels, and then 30 other women came out.
It ain't no thing for me to give up the prequels.
No, hold on. Not so fast. Yeah, that's very funny. Could you give up Star Wars if George Lucas turned out to be a Kevin Spacey type? It's easy to throw. It's easy to throw away. I guess. Could you? Would you?
Well, here's the thing, though. That goes back to my rule. Like, this is stuff that I was watching before I knew what he was.
Right.
It would be like I would need to sit down and watch them and see how it made me feel, I guess.
Right. Okay.
But I couldn't see myself going out and spending any more money on anything. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. So if this happened, would you go see The Last Jedi?
Probably not, no.
Okay. All right. Interesting. Okay.
It would be one of those things where I'm not going to lie, I'd probably watch it, but I'd probably watch it on something that I was already paying for.
Right.
Like I don't know I would go to the theater and see it.
Yeah. No, hear you.
Although I have already bought my ticket, so I really hope that doesn't happen.
Well, so have I, and I hope it doesn't happen too. Because that's the thing
I don't want to be like one of those people that's like, now they're all mad that Keurig coffee makers have decided they pulled their advertising from Sean Hannity, and so they're out there like smashing their Keurig coffee makers. Do you know this story?
Well, I have heard it, and frankly, I'm with them because Keurig coffee makers are the dumbest piece of technology made in the last 15 years.
Well,
Sorry, keep going.
What's stupid is I'm like, you've already bought it, you dum-dums. You've already paid for it. Like, this Keurig does not care. They have your money, dum-dums.
Yeah.
And you're out there smashing it.
Yeah.
It's like the idiots who are like, I'm boycotting Starbucks by going into Starbucks and buying coffee and making my name on the cup Merry Christmas.
Wow.
And I'm like,
who does that?
Idiots. But now I'm off topic. Let's talk about Star Trek.
That brings us to our status check for this week. That is for episode 9 of Star Trek Discovery, Into the Woods We Go. Joining us this week, as every week, is Jeff Bond, the author of The Art of Star Trek, The Kelvin Timeline, a fantastic book, as well as the forthcoming book on Seth MacFarlane's The Orville. Also here is Alexandra August, a huge Star Trek fan, writer for Geek Magazine, as well as the host of Got Thrones and the new, appropriately named, Disco Trek. But let's dive right in. Alex, you haven't seen us here for a couple of weeks. What did you think of last night's episode?
Well, I'm still in the fangirling stage because I've only watched it once. But I think my favorite part was the pacing. This was, I thought, a really interesting, exciting action episode done really well and still very, very intriguing and very, very Star Trek. I wish I had better examples, but I thought it was a great blend of everything that I like about Star Trek, which is the human element, but then also blended with some really nice action and a really satisfying end to Burnham's arc with Giorgio. I thought that was kind of neatly tied up, and it was really satisfying to see Cole go down in flames.
Right. Jeff, what were your thoughts?
I kind of loved this one, and I say that sort of acknowledging that in terms of how the characters have been carried forward, it's still extremely inconsistent. Particularly, as concerns Lorca, where in this episode, Lorca is basically a standard Star Trek captain who's a hero and cares about things, and does the right thing. And there's the only sort of in, the actor's performance, Jason Isaacs, is there a sort of acknowledgement around the edges that this is still the guy that we have watched do all these morally compromising things? I think towards the end of the episode, we've Chris and I were talking last week about, like, is Cornwell dead in, when she's being dragged around inside the Klingon ship. It's sort of unclear in that last episode, and we find out that she is actually alive in this episode. But, we just had this sort of huge, half an episode devoted to Cornwell and Lorca sort of rekindling an affair and then having this huge confrontation, and then him sort of shipping her off to a trap where she's going to be captured and potentially killed by Klingons.
Tortured.
Yes, that he's seems to be, if not in on that, at least very aware that this is a possibility that might be good for him. So I think the biggest thing that stood out for me, in negative terms for this episode, is that we don't even get a scene between Lorca and Cornwell. She's just sent off on a shuttle at the end, and you can see in Jason Isaacs' performance, there's sort of when he gets the report about her, there you see some of the shadings of shades of gray in his performance, but there's nothing in the writing acknowledging that. Now,
yeah, I felt like that was really abrupt as well.
Yeah. So, but I have to say that in terms, I was literally laughing and giggling in glee at the action and visual effects of this episode and the pacing. And I think from the show has always looked great, but I've always been sort of unimpressed by a lot of the spaceship shots of the Discovery, where it doesn't seem to be rendered, really full. It looks a little cartoonish considering, how vivid all the visuals of this show are. And even last week when I saw the previews for this episode, I thought, oh, these shots of the Discovery look really cool. And when they go into this whole space battle of the ship jumping around, the Klingon sarcophagus ship, between the just the pacing of the music. And this is the first time I also, I complained early on, the whole idea of the Discovery turning into this like Rube Goldberg, sort of like kitchen appliance when it, goes into the spore drive.
Right.
I always just thought was goofy, but the first time I think there's a shot where the Klingons are looking at it from behind and it's moving up ahead of them and then starts spinning. And I right away was like, oh my God, that is cool. And then the whole sequence of it jumping around, and then the fight scene, I loved. I feel like Sonequa Martin Green. I just read somebody saying like, oh, they're quitting the show because she's so terrible, and I feel like there's a sense out there, at least among some fans, that they don't like her and she's not giving them what they want from the hero of a Star Trek show. But I thought she was fantastic. The whole way that scene was played of her calling the Klingon leader out, and it's a cliche, in dealing with Klingons. I'm gonna, because you were so
he
honorable,
was kind of a wonderful
Klingon
cliche. Like he was
Right.
he was kind of my favorite Klingon in that moment when he was like, oh, I'm going to use this comm badge. I pick my teeth with it. And I was like, yes, this is the Klingon vibe that I enjoy and also dread occasionally. But Cole was kind of that glorious, that sort of fun-loving, joyful warrior, even though he's a piece of
I love that kind of, Hunt for Red October use of the translator and the communicator, so they're all speaking English, and that automatically makes the Klingon scenes work better. I loved, there's a moment where she's knocked on the floor and she gets up bleeding, and she just has this look like I'm going right back into this. And
she was see her getting vengeance in George Yu. I thought they played that really nicely. It wasn't overplayed. It wasn't overdone. It wasn't hammy, and it wasn't too sentimental. It was just perfect. And you kind of, I'm still bitter about George Yu's death, especially because I can just hear Laurel talking about how Vogue was picking the meat off of her skull. Like, it still makes me angry. So this was very vindicating.
I thought when Burnham walks out of the turbolift after the battle, it actually, the look on her face reminded me of Shatner. She has that, and I'm not talking about the cliches about like how Shatner acts, but Shatner is like basically his ability to register like emotion and wear and tear without words. And she had all of that. When she came out, like, I totally felt like this is someone, for the first time, I felt like this is someone who I could see in command, and this is someone I could see, become a captain. And now I'm starting to see her, journeying along that path to basically becoming a hero. And that was really exciting. I've seen, I think I saw at least one comment out there that basically like this was a great episode to like a different show. And that's sort of what I was talking about earlier, that it seems to mess around with or ignore certain character arcs that have been moving along. But I think, there's obviously the central character arc of the show is Burnham. And that has kind of run hot and cold. And she is, there's an element to which she is she's in a romance. We have to see her as a woman in a romance. And how is that going to play alongside her, being someone we hope to see in command someday? How is she going to handle that romance? I think that's all been done really well. I mean, she shows incredible vulnerability, And she's always been great at that. Walking Dead, kind of just showing all this emotion underneath the surface, and that works great for this romance. But at the same time, she shows, I think, great strength of character. So that was, I thought it was just a spectacular visual showpiece, and I loved it for moving this Burnham's character arc along. Now, I've heard that I've got like kind of a mole in the production, and I've heard that this director was actually one of Brian Fuller's original people, and that I was so excited watching this. I mean, there's like those kind of weird flashbacks and all the post-traumatic stress syndrome cuts, almost reminded me of like Alien.
Well, that kind of speaks
so creepy.
What do you guys think of the theory that, and I guess this is potential spoilers here because I'm pretty sure this theory is true, that Tyler is Vogue, that he's undergone, that he's undergone. I can't remember if you guys have discussed that, because I feel like those flashbacks kind of confirmed that, like.
Yeah,
as did Laurel's reaction to him in the brig when she was like, "It's you," and then she's like, "I won't let them hurt you," like kind of clearly. And there's also even a shot, if you look really closely, I screenshot it. There's a shot of albino skin being operated on by. It looks like a very Klingon-esque scalpel.
Yeah, it's
tiny batleth, but.
I mean, I was thinking like of just watching how the character behaves. I guess, and this did sort of also confirm what I was sort of theorizing with Chris, was not that he was, that it was just Vok, but that he was more like a sleeper cell, someone who wasn't aware himself of what was going on. Because I said it didn't seem to. Believable to me that he could sort of function so convincingly as a human being and have all these emotions and stuff, and understand people. But the fact that he's not aware of what's going on himself. I guess I can see it eventually being compelling. Just hearing the theory, the second he was introduced, which you did. I mean, it was sort of all over out there with a lot of people thinking it was too obvious. But I think that they've, let the character develop enough that I think it will have some impact. It's just too bad that it's sort of like everyone seems to either guess it or, have some kind of inside line on the fact that it kind of ruins it.
Oh boy. Now,
go ahead. But the one thing I wanted to say about the director, though, is that apparently, I thought he did such a brilliant job with this, and apparently he worked great with the production and everything, but that because of, Brian Fuller basically does not want him to work for the show anymore. He's got him like a permanent gig on American Gods, and apparently, it was an ultimatum that if he wanted to keep working with Brian Fuller, he couldn't work on Discover. It was very disappointing. Because I think they really did raise the bar visually with this episode, and it's something I would love to see them continue. And the pacing, it's probably not going to with this guy.
Yeah,
I mentioned the pacing specifically because the pacing last episode really bothered me, and I thought there were moments. Like, I thought last episode was a bunch of really good moments that never made a cohesive whole. And it was frustrating because I love Doug Jones, but I've been iffy on Saru, just because I'm just not much for prickly science officers. And I don't think that they've drawn out. It took me a while to really engage with the conflict he had with Burnham. Not that I didn't understand it, but I just didn't think it was handled particularly well until last week. But they also, like, the stuff with the romance they inserted with Burnham and Tyler just feels really pushed and unnecessary at this point. And it just like I said, and it just mostly was the pacing last episode. And this week was just perfect. It felt, and it was, and such a great, and it was a really daring Starfleet mission, which we didn't usually get to see. Like we got to see that kind of in Chain of Command when Picard gets captured behind Cardassian enemy lines, essentially, because they're doing this like kind of cool espionage mission that they're not allowed to tell anybody about. But those are pretty few and far between, those episodes. And so this one, I was like, you're going to beam onto a Klingon ship and like hang out and just plant these sensors and then just chill for 4 minutes while the Klingons are doing battle and you're on their ship. And the only thing you have protecting you are these pattern scramblers or whatever.
Right.
And she's literally on this bridge. She is on the bridge, just kind of hiding. It was just like
with a huge beeping piece of science equipment.
Yeah.
It's true. Yeah.
Big lights.
Made those a little bit easier to hide, maybe.
Starfleet logos. The whole deal.
I know, it was like there was just property of Starfleet just right up. I really hoped it was so like there was a level of absurdity to that, but for some reason I just really enjoyed it, and I kind of hoped that if and when she defeated Cole, that like the part of my sketch comedy brain was like, what if they just endow her with like that she's their leader now because she defeated Cole, so then they're like, well, you're in charge, and that's how the war ends because she chose trial by combat.
That's right.
It worked out.
Yep.
I was harumphing a little bit. I feel like
that's a pretty Klingon thing to do. I don't know.
That'd be pretty interesting. I was harumphing a moment ago because if he turns out to be Vok, I'm going to be so irritated. I think I don't know if it's because it was, telegraphed or kind of all the things that you were saying, Jeff. It just seems, isn't it enough that it's a Starfleet officer that was horribly treated and mistreated as a prisoner, and I find that aspect and his reaction to her last night, even though I agree with you, Alex, about it, them showing some kind of interesting flashbacks in his PTSD moment. It just seems like they're trying one or two revelations too much.
They still have some wiggle room,
right?
To get out of it, because the PTSD story and even her lines about him. I mean, she was supposed to have some kind of twisted relationship with him, so the lines are kind of vague enough that you could almost, but which I'm sure obviously is intentional because they're trying to muddy the waters. But yeah, I agree, and we'll have to see how it's played out. But obviously, we haven't seen Vok, since we've seen Tyler, and it's I don't know, but it's like the rumors have been out there for so long. It's like pretty hard to ignore, but I agree. It's not as in the PTSD story is much more interesting to me than that idea.
Well, they'll really undercut that. Like, I like the show that it's being a little bit sort of daringly political and relevant. Like they had like the Klingons, I feel like stand for a pretty obvious portion of our society today. And they even had Cole say, lock her up to Burnham, which I refuse to believe was a coincidence.
Right.
And so when they're being very blatant about PTSD, which I have a feeling would not be spoken about using the same language 200 years from now.
Right.
So I feel, I think they're being very pointed about that. I think it really undercuts that if it turns into Vok. So like part of my brain is like, I wonder if maybe they found a way to, in a very Star Trek kind of way, like insert a portion of like Vok's consciousness or like do some kind of, I guess this would be more BSG, but like biological consciousness transference. I'm not sure if that's the right word. I don't know. But
I hear what you're saying.
Wondering if Tyler was an actual person and they managed to merge their consciousnesses somehow, and Vok is buried underneath there. And that's like, I do think that like Vok, I don't think that we can deny that L'Orel's reaction to Tyler is indicative of the fact that Vok is somewhere in there, because that's what Mary Chief was putting out there, at least.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot more sense to me, because I think the idea that they would take Vok, and maybe this is too much of the aspiring writer in me or whatever, is I had this problem with Star Trek Into Darkness, where, we're supposed to believe that there's the Starfleet admiral, this 200-year-old, murderous dictator gets unfrozen, and what is he going to do? I know, we'll turn him into a secret agent. And then have him do all this other stuff. And then here it's, all right, we have this leader of this kind of powerful Klingon band, and I know we're going to turn him into a sleeper agent and kind of erase his mind, and we're going to do all this stuff. It's like, if the Klingons want to do something like that, just grab some, great Klingon warrior and insert him into Starfleet. Why pick this? It seems too convenient half for the actual.
Well, he has a record
from a storytelling point of view.
Well, I think Ash Tyler has a legitimate Starfleet record, so I can understand why they would want to house folks, want to use this likeness just because it would be easy to get him on board. But it's just still, I don't know. I think the only thing that really, the more I get to know this theory, the more I'm just kind of not, it's just a little bit too obvious maybe. And that's why, but also the only thing I think that really would make me very excited about it would be if at the end of this whole thing, the Klingons scrap this as a horrible idea and very against Klingon culture. And then they sell this technology to the Cardassians. And that's how we get the Obsidian Order. And we just get this post-credit scene of being we'll just sell it to these assholes. They're willing to pay whatever they want, whatever we want for it. And they're sorry.
That's all right.
I mean, this is also almost an alternate explanation for the whole, why are there very human looking Klingons in the, original series, and I hated what their idea for that on the Enterprise. So I almost would like this better, whatever it would turn out to be. I mean, another thing that I
liked Worf's explanation in the Trials and Tribulations. That's all I needed.
Don't talk about
we do not speak of it with others. That's it.
But another thing that I had heard was that last week's episode was intended to be the season finale, and it does sort of end on a cliffhanger. And it's another thing that drove me crazy about this episode is that they spend the whole episode defending this planet that they were on last week. There's absolutely no acknowledgement of kind of the race on the planet and the fact that they had called the Klingons and the Federation to the planet. So that whole kind of storyline is sort of tossed off and thrown away, and now we've got this ending, which seems to be starting a whole other story arc, unless they're going to solve it in one episode. So it's, again, it's really weird because I probably enjoyed this episode more than any of the previous ones, just in terms of it being sheer fun. But it definitely brings up a lot of annoying questions and it's certainly in the unsatisfying follow-up to the previous episodes in terms of answering the questions brought up by that.
Well, let me step back a little bit from this episode and kind of look at the whole season, because we've had all these hopes, we've had all these thoughts, we've gone through and watched episode by episode. Now that we're able to kind of step back and look at what what the producers are calling Chapter 1, how do you think it's all coming together? Because I think parts of it, Jeff, before this started in last year, you were talking about, Star Trek needs to try to compete at the highest level of prestige television. And I think when it comes to visuals, special effects, sets, makeup, it's definitely there. But I'm wondering, just as a show, how is it coming? How is it coming together for you guys?
I actually said this, I think, last week or the week before. Despite last week's episode, I feel like this show has got a lot of really wonderful elements, and I feel like it's cruising along to becoming something really great. I think it's been a bumpy first season, and I think they're definitely feeling it out, maybe more than other prestige shows have in the past. But I think that that's just sort of the nature of the fact that this is Star Trek and the pressure's on, and I think that there are a lot of cooks in the kitchen, and it's just taken them a minute to find their feet. But beyond that, I think I'm optimistic. I'm very optimistic. I wish we got more of the crew. I wish it felt more of an ensemble piece. Mm-hmm. But
it's funny because they've introduced some, visually very distinctive. This bridge officer is like the kind of robot, and the woman who lost or has the eye damage or whatever from who was on the Shinzu, and so they've established some sort of the look of a familiar crew, but it's true that they don't really go in and explore them maybe in the way some of the other shows have. But at the same time, yeah, I totally agree with Alex that this is, I mean, if you stack this up against the first season of almost any other Star Trek show, other than the original, the original I think started, had its first season was definitely some of its strongest. But the other shows have always had that problem, is that they've been measured against the first show, and the first seasons of the ensuing shows have always been anything from terrible like the Next Generation to just sort of okay. The first year of Deep Space Nine, they did start getting some strong episodes by about midway through or towards the end of the first season. But I think Voyager and particularly Enterprise was just bland and kind of burnt out. There's nothing particularly exciting about those shows. This show, I think, it has been uneven. It's been frustrating in that by the third episode, I really felt like I was watching that was written by the showrunners, and I felt very confident and like they really had these characters figured out. And then in subsequent episodes that have been written by other people, and they have all, to some extent, veered off erratically in terms of how they treat the characters. And this last, it is, as I said, this last episode certainly is one of the strongest on numerous levels, but at the same time, it's one of the most frustrating in terms of like what, where are we going with these characters. But I do feel like this show has succeeded in operating like a contemporary TV show and having acting, direction, production values that are reflective of what television is now. And I think basically it's been a big challenge, and it has not been 100% figured out yet. How do you carry all the formula and conventions of Star Trek and speak to the fans and still do contemporary television? I think that it's been like wildly successful some of the time at doing that, just not all of it. But I mean, we're like, halfway through the first season. I think obviously the show is going to run a few years, and I'll be very interested to see where they're at, like halfway through season 2. I would think, and they know that they're going to be taking, time between this season and next to figure out what's going on. They've said that they're going to be taking a look at what's worked and what hasn't, and I have a good feeling that they're going to be able to look at some things that kind of like obviously are sticking out and not working that well, and do a course correction. But it seems like they have some very talented, writers and directors, actors working on this show, and it's to me it's got more promise than anything since Deep Space Nine. And I don't see it getting into a formula. That's the one thing you can say about this season.
Definitely.
Is that it is tried all kinds of different, we've had basically comedy episodes, sort of caper episodes, espionage, all sorts of crazy science fiction concepts. So it's not just like, we go to a planet and find a race that's sort of like ours but has a different idea about something. It's
well, and it's going to be anthologized. It's going to be a different, just even in the broad sense, it won't be formulaic, because they're apparently by all accounts going to finish up the Klingon war arc this season and then move on to something completely different next season. I'm at this point just interested to see if we're going to get the Lorca Cornwall thing. Really bothered me, because I feel like they might have written themselves into a corner with that one, and they're just going to back out of it and not acknowledge it, because I don't know that on Star Trek you can have a captain who sent an admiral knowingly to her death, or knowingly and send someone he cared about knowingly to what he knows will be she'll be tortured. I mean, he has firsthand experience with this, and so it's I don't know why I went off on that tangent.
I
talk about it.
I do think that they are going to have to. I mean, the biggest character reveal about Lorca is that he basically, either allowed or to them to die or executed his entire crew.
Yes!
This is like the first mass murderer starship captain. So you cannot forget that. And I know
Kaiser Sose his whole crew.
Yeah, I mean, I talked to Jason Isaacs, and this was only after seeing like two of his episodes, and he could not talk in detail about what, he was going to do, but he did say that he would not have done the role if there would not have been, a challenging arc for his character. So I don't see him just going to be like a standard heroic starship captain. But that it begs the question of what's going to happen to him. Is he going to be the captain through the whole series?
I think that Cornwell's going to have to. She's going to be the key there. We're going to have to see if she can, she's basically the one who holds his fate in her hands. It's going to be whether or not she talks. Because I can see, the only way I can see him, being a Starfleet captain, because it's problematic for me, not necessarily for, the legalese of Starfleet. It's problematic for me because it is Star Trek, and this is crossing a line for me to have somebody in the captain's chair who's pulled this kind of stuff.
At some point he's going to have to be. It's going to have to pay off at some point. There's going to have to be a point to it. But I don't know what's going to be, and that's why this last episode is so strange, because there, other than some shadings of his performance, there's nothing in the dialogue of this scene to acknowledge any of that. It's just, I'm a regular starship heroic captain. Right. Yeah. I did love that he puts his eye drops in to watch the ship explode.
That was cool.
A great moment. I mean, it's just,
I'm not going to miss this. Where's my Visine?
Yeah. It's funny because there's I think a lot of fans, from the beginning, kind of playing off the J.J. Abrams films and the connection with that, were like, oh, this is just going to be shoot 'em up Star Trek. And you could certainly argue that this last episode was that. It was just pure action. But there's still a lot going on with the characters. It's just it's still hard to see where it's all going. Other than the Klingon spy plot, which seems a little too easy to see where it's going.
Right. So, bringing it home, what are you guys thinking? What have you heard? What are you hoping for the second half of season 1, which I guess begins this? I've heard the 7th of January. What are you looking for? I think there was, correct me if I'm wrong, I think there was a pretty gigantic hint that they're in the mirror universe last night when it dropped out, and for a brief moment there were two discoveries side by side. There's some of the earlier dialogue with Stamets sounded like sort of hinting about that, right. Which I'm not. I love the mirror universe, but that's another thing where there's been a whole theory about Lorca being, maybe he's from the mirror universe, and I don't know how interested I am in that, but I'll see how what it is. I mean, obviously there's this whole ending is kind of a left turn and throwing the ship out of the universe where we're at war with the Klingons. And so it does seem like maybe, the Klingon aspect is going to be sidelined for at least a few episodes while they figure that out. I haven't really the slightest idea what's going to go on. I don't have any big
knowledge about, the details of where it's going to go, but I'm very interested. I guess I just know that there's going to be, there's going to be a fewer episodes in the back half.
Right.
So it'll all be over before we know it.
Right. Alex, what are your hopes for the final couple episodes of season 1?
I would like Lorca to return a little bit to his more morally ambiguous roots. He's been sort of like the mud episode. He was like, it was almost goofy how kind of surprised and befuddled he was by mud. And then this past episode, I agree with Jeff. Yeah, like I think he's sort of lost that edge. So I would like to see. I want more of Lorca. And I read an article that communicated kind of my thoughts that I hadn't really crystallized yet, which is just that this is Burnham's show and it's not the ensemble that DS9, Voyager, and Next Gen were. That, like the captains were definitely the leads of that show, but each character got here and there their own episodes, and it really felt like a true ensemble. And I found myself, I didn't realize I missed that until somebody articulated it. And so I want like a Stamets-centric episode. I want a Tilly-centric episode. I want, and I feel like maybe this was just not the season to do that, or the group of episodes to do that, because they had so much world building to establish, and so much credit to earn, I guess. But right. I'm hoping that we get a little bit, I'm hoping it slows down a little bit more so we can feel out some of the other characters in the way that we've gotten to feel out Saru and Burnham, and a little bit Lorca, and definitely Tyler. I'm interested to see Laurel interact with Tyler. She is, despite the fact that the storyline is a bit frustrating to me, and I really didn't need to see her naked. It was, she interests me. I think she's a unique Klingon, given that her house is very weird.
Right.
And seems unique to Klingons, with all their subterfuge. But yeah, so I would like, please, more Laurel and more Lorca. Yeah, she's very, very interesting. And I'm also very happy that they spoke English on the sarcophagus ship this week.
Yeah.
Tip my hat to that. Thank you so much. I didn't even care that they were speaking English to her universal translator, which was speaking Klingon. Did not care.
Right. Exactly.
It was great.
Yeah. All right. Is there anything else that you guys would like to say about Star Trek Discovery this week?
Haven't we?
I'm pretty solid.
All right. Well, on Jeff's enthusiastic goodbye, that is enough for this episode of Dorking Out. We are beaming back Sonia Mansfield so she can say at the end of the show,
goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
The Dorking Out Show is on Twitter at Dorking Out Show, where you can find Chris at Jet Jurgens and Sonia at The Sonia Show. You can read about Sonia's random adventures at thesoniashow.com and track the slow and creeping progress of Chris's novel and his other hijinks at jetjurgens.com. You can find out more about The Dorking Out Show at dorkingoutshow.com. While you're over there, you can support us by giving us a review on iTunes. We have a handy-dandy iTunes link to whisk you right back to 2007, where you can leave your review and 5-star rating in iTunes. We'd do it for your podcast. Want to dork out even more? Well, you can sign up for our newsletter, where you'll get all the headlines we use as fuel for the show. That's it for this week. Thanks for listening.